You're listening to the manuscript of Soul, Part 1, Chapter 1. Interstellar Space Station A2712. The rusty metal city seemed quiet from afar, laying there like a little glimmering star in the dark and endless silence of the universe. But the closer you get, the more you will see that this tiny dot is not just a dead place like most of the other stars, because around this star, in necessary distance, grew a giant, pulsating, breathing and moving metal metropolis, full of humming star cars and busy souls of the millions of people living there. The entire city clung to the massive framework of Space Station A2712, laying there in the floodlight of the Alpha Centauri binary star system. The time is divided in daylight and in night, while day is 1 month long, and so is the dark night. Dusk was settling over the station when Tavi's star car carried her through the city. In 1 week the night would begin, and the last rays of Centauri's light that now painted the city gold would make space for the long night's darkness and a dome of thousands of stars and galaxies. Tavi carved her way through endless grey buildings, stacked as high as the eye can see. Flickering neon lights washed the walls in shifting colors. The workday was over, and Tavi Gent, called Tavi, wanted to make a quick stop at their regular bar called the Zuhause, where her friends were already waiting. She looked tired out of the window at the busy scenery, at humming star cars, buildings with glowing advertisements and big neon signs marking restaurants, workshops and shadowy bars. She crossed bridges and flew past a few metal beams that were leftovers from the station's early construction days. From poles and windows hung heavily the space station's banners, bearing the glowing star Centauri, the star of enlightenment and the symbol of the station. When she arrived, her self-driving star car decelerated before docking at the charging station, and she stepped out to the platform leading to the entrance of the bar. She pressed the shabby button next to the rusty door, and it opened ponderously. Tavia entered the airlock, and as the door closed behind her with the same sluggishness, oxygen began to flow in, hissing and wheezing as the pressure equalized. She removed her helmet and took a deep and relieved breath, just as the second door in front of her opened with a loud scraping sound, and at the same time a wave of laughter and voices met her. A smile spread across her face, and a rush of excitement spread in her belly and washed the tiredness away. She stepped inside and was immediately greeted with a warm grin. John, the bartender, and a good friend of them stood behind the counter and waved. "Hey, finally made it? The usual?" he asked. "Finally made it. The usual," she replied, and walked to the table where Lux, Kent and Roxy had already started drinking a beer. Kent and Roxy were a couple since high school, and since then very good friends of Tavi too. When she sat down, Roxy was laughing about something Kent said, tucking a strand of her silky blonde hair behind her ear. Lux was a colleague of Tavia. They were both scientists at the same institute, and good friends. It seemed like Lux and Kent, as so often, had a heated discussion ongoing. "If we could harness the energy from both stars, we could travel anywhere in speeds we can't even imagine now. We'd probably have enough energy to create wormholes and travel to other star systems in seconds. We wouldn't need to try using other dimensions to travel." Lux rolled his eyes. "If that worked, someone would have done it already." "That's exactly what people once said about interstellar space stations. And look, now we're living in one ourselves." Kent leaned back in his chair, A strand of his long brown hair fell in his face, and he took a long sip of beer without taking his eyes away from Kent, as if he was still expecting an answer. "One Centauri beer for the lady," interrupted John, setting a big mug down in front of Tavi. "Thanks." John sat down with them. "How's the hyperspace project going? Still trying to punch holes through reality?" he asked with a smile. Tavia and Lux worked at a research center which was focused on interdimensional travel methods. The project they were working on developed a new type of spacecraft, which was capable of traveling not only through space, since this was not very effective in the past, but potentially through other higher dimensional pathways. "In my opinion, this is a waste of time. There must be another way," Ken threw in. The research was aiming to give humans a chance to leave the Alpha Centauri binary star system and reach a new place to live, a star system with a planet that could be their new Earth, where humans lived before they came here, to the space station. The previous interstellar migration from the planet Earth to their current location had taken humans several centuries of travel and required multiple generations to live and die aboard the colony ship. No one of them had ever seen Earth or the spaceship that left Earth more than 500 years ago. The only way for them to ever leave their metal world, their grey city in the middle of nowhere, was to overcome the physical limitations of their dimension, of their time-space. "Can you explain the interdimensional travel again? It sounds so cool," John asked. Researchers found out that it is possible to create a pathway into another dimension where distances and time behaves different than it is behaving in our dimension, Luke said, seemingly proud. "The idea is to travel from A to B through that dimension, to travel to another star system and see if the target star system inherits a planet in the right distance, to have water, an atmosphere, the right mass for comfortable gravity, and a magnetic field. Researchers found many different dimensions, and some are physically so different from our reality that one can conquer vast distances in a very short amount of time. In one dimension, it would take us, with our thrust and speed, only a month long to get to, for example, Barnard's star system." "That sounds so stupid, like out of a science fiction story," Ken said, annoyed. "Back in the days, humans fled Earth because it was so destroyed. They were always relying on a backup and left for a better life, and now, who would have known they are still yawning for something like Earth?" Tavi said thoughtfully. "I hope so much that it will work and we will have something like a planet Earth again." "Imagine we could sit in the grass." John pushed his elbow in Ken's side and smiled wide. For a long time, the Alpha Centauri system was full of promise. But when the first humans arrived, they found nothing but grey, barren planets. No microbes, no life at all. If this would succeed, it would be the first time humanity would travel beyond its own star system in a single lifetime, Roxy said, eyes glimmered. "There are already a lot of simulations going on, and I think it could lead us to something, but I can't say too much," Tavi added. Until now it was all mere theory and dreams, and years of research that didn't seem to come to a conclusion, but the mere thought of success in this project made everyone curious for more. "That's so exciting. Stefano, did you hear that?" The bar owner and a good friend of the group too, Stefano, waved over from the counter. Besides running this place, he was an amateur researcher with a small satellite lab set up in his garage, and he was obsessed with finding extraterrestrial life. Most people thought he was crazy and didn't take him seriously. Sometimes he mistook radio interference for alien signals or claimed to have seen UFOs that turned out to be just their own satellites passing by. And of course this time was no different. He came over to their table with a tray and sat down in the last empty seat. "I've got something to tell you guys. I found something." He looked around, lowering his voice. "I picked up a signal." "And I know what you're thinking," he said, raising his hands defensively. "Here he goes again, spouting nonsense. But this time I'm 100% sure. I've got a signal. You have to see it, tonight after my shift." Lux, who had just finished his beer, stretched his arms out and yawned. "Sorry, Stefano. It was a long day," he said. "I need to sleep. I'll check it out another time." He stood up and slapped his hand on Ken's shoulder, smiling. Then he took his helmet from under the table. "Bye, guys. See you at work, Tavi." He walked slowly through the crowd towards the door. Ken shot him an annoyed look, but quickly turned back around and his bad mood seemed to have vanished. "We saw the signal. It is really worth seeing. I really want to believe in it." He laid his arm around Roxy and sank into it. They finished their drinks, and Roxy and Ken said goodbye to make their way to their star cars at home. Tavia went to pay and glanced around through the almost empty, shabby bar. "Will you show me your signal?" Stefano's face lit up. "If you want, sure." Tavia and Stefano walked behind the counter and down a long corridor lined with old pictures rescued from Earth. Stefano loved collecting that kind of things. His bar was unlike any other on the station. While everywhere else functionality ruled, his place was like a little museum full of artifacts that once seemed important to the humans on Earth. He'd managed to find carpets and stacks of old books that he turned into furniture by laying planks over them. There were board games, picture frames, tablecloths, lampshades, and chandeliers. Rare items one would otherwise only see in photos. Some people mocked his obsession with old dusty things, but Tavia thought it was very uniquely beautiful. At the end of the hallway, they reached a narrow spiral staircase that led down into a cold, dim room. Stefano pulled a rope hanging from the ceiling, and a single light bulb flickered on. Satellite dishes and cables hung everywhere. The walls were covered in screens, drawings, and signal printouts. Tavia shivered in the chill, but Stefano didn't seem to notice. He started talking excitedly. "Look at this!" He pointed to a long sheet of paper showing a printout from the oscilloscope recorder. A signal ran across it, like many he'd shown them before. "See this?" He beamed at her. Tavia looked at the paper and examined the jagged lines. At one point there was a spike far taller than the rest. "This one?" "Exactly," Stefano nodded eagerly. I've never seen such a strong signal on a radio spectrograph before. It's incredible." He carefully took the paper back to admire it himself. Tavia leaned closer, studying the pattern skeptically. "But how do you know this time it's real?" she asked. "It is real. I know it." Stefano turned away from her, as if her doubts might break the spell. "And you know what the most wonderful thing about all this is?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. "No. What?" He made a meaningful pause. The signal came from the direction of Earth. He smiled, watching her face for any reaction, but she froze. For a moment she thought he'd definitely lost his mind. "Stefano, that's impossible. The Earth as it is described doesn't exist anymore. There can't be life there. No one who lived there back then is still alive." "The signal says otherwise," he replied firmly, folding up the long sheet of paper with shaking hands and clumsy excitement. "Maybe you're right." Tavia didn't believe it, but wanted to calm him down. "I'm sorry, but I should get going now too. Will you tell me if you receive anything else or find out more?" "I'll let you know," Stefano promised. Tavia said goodbye and climbed back up the spiral staircase. As she walked through the hallway, she looked at the pictures on the walls, drawings and photos from a time long past, when humans still lived on Earth. Pictures of landscapes, roaring oceans, forests. It must have been a magnificent place, a world full of rushing rivers and plants and flowers and forests and mountains and snow. How magical it must have felt to live there, to breathe clean, fresh air, to feel the sun warm on your skin, to look up into a vast blue sky. What they learned already in school was that the Earth has been a place of incredible diversity, so many different animals and plants, creatures that could fly, and others that lived only underwater. To them, it sounded like a fantasy world, and it was hard to believe that something like this really existed. Some people believed it was all a hoax, a story created by the government to stop the society from questioning their research and search for another planet. If all people are longing for something greater, the paradise, they will do everything for it and support the leaders that are promising it. But of course Tavi knew the history. By the time their ancestors left, the planet they lived on, called Earth, was already ruined. Most of the species living there were extinct. Humans had cut down almost all forests, poisoned all oceans, and drained the planet's resources to ensure their own expansion. Everything they were interested in was growth, more humans, more space, more food, more gold, more things. They took more than what was there, enslaved each other for money and killed each other. At some point, nature took its revenge. The Earth was struck by diseases and environmental disasters. Floodings and droughts, snowstorms and sandstorms raged across the lands. There was no turning back. The planet was a sinking ship, and no one was able to escape. No one, except for those that were able to get a place on the ship. The ship that promised a life for those worthy of leaving the chaos behind them forever. The ancestors of the space station A2712. The only hope back then was to find a lifeboat to escape. During that time, many wealthy private individuals invested in space research. Some built their own rockets, hoping to flee in time. Eventually, the wealthy of the world decided to build a massive space station together, a place where humanity could live on, free from environmental collapse and disease. The journey from Earth to the station took over 300 years. The generation that arrived here only knows Earth from the stories of the ancestors. But that world was long gone, and some people wishing different, like Stefano, will not bring it back. The door behind Tavi closed slowly, with its loud scraping sound, and she put her helmet on. As she watched the other door open and the golden light of dusk hugged her gently, and she walked back to her star car. This was her favorite time of the cycle. The weeks of dusk were magical. She always wanted to hold on to it, because the night was long and dark. In the beginning, she liked it, but after some time it was pressing down on her. She sat into her star car and typed in the coordinates of her home into the screen.